So next up, we want to create a window, we want to create a renderer, and we probably want to draw something with the renderer so we know everything is working. So SDL create window is a useful function. So SDL create window returns a pointer to an SDL window object. We haven't talked about pointers yet. You can think of them as shitty versions of references. This is an address to an SDL window somewhere in memory, in the same way a reference is an address to an object in memory. The difference between a pointer and a reference is that a pointer can be null, or rather it can be the null pointer. So a pointer can be invalid. It can point to nothing, which is tricky and sometimes useful. In C code, this is what you'll see a lot. You'll get pointers. The star means that it's a pointer. And so we're going to work with it. And later on, we will wrap that so that we don't have to worry about this being a null pointer. So create window takes a title for the window. It takes a position on the X and Y axis. It takes a width and a height, and it takes a bunch of flags. This is in the same way as the init function takes flags. They are unsigned integers, and you can OR them together so you can send in several flags as one number. Here we can see that the return value is either the pointer that you'd expect or the null pointer. We can talk more about the null pointer in the lecture, but the core point here is that you have to check every time you use it if it is the null pointer before you try to use it. If you try to use the null pointer, your program will hopefully crash. In terms of flags, we are looking at this, and we don't need any of these. So OpenGL is neat if you want to do hardware accelerated rendering, but you still have to set up an OpenGL context. We're not going to bother with that. We're going to use software rendering, let the CPU draw. We're not going to go full screen. We don't want our program to be resizable. In games, resizable is tricky. It gets difficult fast. So we're going to just send in 0 for flags here, I think. Let me actually see if it says anything about using... No, but here's an interesting fact. The size of the window is limited to 16,384 pixels. That's good. We can actually test that as a way of making sure that we're testing for errors correctly. So anyway, we want SDL create window. Let's make this happen. SDL create window. It took a title to begin with, so let's just call this my game. Probably spell it correctly. It needed a position, and in this case, I don't care about the position, I just want the window wherever. And if you look at this tooltip, there is in fact a flag for if you don't care about the position, which is SDL window pos undefined. SDL window pos, oh, that's for window position, obviously, undefined. My spelling is way off. We can see that this is defined as something. We can peek the definition. It seems to be defined as 0. So both of these constants are defined as 0. This is a C-style define. It's not how we want to declare our constants. We would make them typed constants. But anyway, 0 and this is the same thing. It's just if we use this, this definition, just like a constant, it gives us a name for the number. Let me rephrase this. We know that this function here takes a string first, and then it takes an integer. And so the question I was asking in my head, what integer means I don't care about the position? And in this case, that is 0. It didn't have to be 0. It could be a negative value, for instance, or any other arbitrary value. And to be clear, when I read this code and hand it over to someone else, I'm using the pre-declared constant SDL window pos undefined instead of a plain 0. Remember that hard-coded values are a sin, which in fact makes this a sin as well, but let's live with that for now. We can refactor in a bit. I want X and Y to be undefined so that the window pops up wherever it wants to go. Then we wanted a width and a height. So let's say half HD, 1280, 720. And flags, I'm just going to pass in 0. I don't have any flags for it. That should create the window. When we create something, we have to take care to destroy it as well, which means, first of all, we have to actually save the pointer to this object wherever it is created in memory. So we create an SDL window pointer, that's the star. Let's just call it window. So SDL create window returns this pointer. And before we exit the application, we have to destroy that object again. And we can do that with the symmetrical function. Every create function in SDL has a destroy function. So we have destroy window, and we pass in our window pointer. We are still not checking for errors, so let's do that before we test this code. We can do if the window is the null pointer, that's null PTR. It's this. It doesn't matter what it is. Right now, you just want to know that if you're checking for an invalid pointer, you should compare it to the null pointer. If there is a null pointer, we want to find out what the error is, and then we want to exit our main with an error code. So I'm just going to pass out 1 here. Okay. So already, before we have tested anything, we have a few smells here. We see that we have some redundant code. Like this error checking is very similar between these two things. So that tells me we might want to make this a function of some sort, or we might want to look into another solution for error reporting and getting out of the program when an error occurs. We also know that we have hard-coded values here and over here, the width and the height of the window, so we might want to bring those out into constants. And yeah, that's a refactoring task. So let's compile first and see that everything works. Control F5. You saw the window pop up, but it went away immediately. That makes sense. We could put a breakpoint here to pause the program, but we can also use another useful function, SDL delay. SDL delay takes an integer it takes milliseconds is what it takes. So we tell it how long we want it to wait. And in this case, let's say 2 seconds. Control F5. Here we go. Our window pops up, lives for 2 seconds, and then we're out. Very cool. So we can try actually breaking this. We saw that there was a limit to the size of the windows. It said 16,300. So let's make this very, very large, a super wide window. Let's try that. Oh, sorry, my bad. Let me Control F5 so we get the output. So you might not see this in the video, but here's the output from our CR. Our error output says window is too large. So that's what SDL get error gave us for this problem, which is exactly right. It's what we'd want. Let me look at how long this video is, 8 minutes. Let's do just some quick refactoring here. I want to make those consts. So do we call them window width or do I call them something else? World width, window width, stage width. Well, let's name them stupidly now. We can fix them later. Const width. We need a type as well, is probably a good idea. I don't remember if those were ints or unsigned ints, so I'm going to just hover over create window, but I don't get tooltips as long as I have syntax errors. Let me just bring that out and then give me the tooltip, please. Here we go. Param width. I want the type, please. It's an integer. Okay, so not unsigned. Const int height. Should also get that name sorted out. So const standard string. We don't have the string header, so I'm going to bring that in. Include string. Let's call this app name. Now, this argument is supposed to be a char string, and so our standard string will not do. But the standard string has a function to get a C-style string from a proper string. So what we can do is do app name and then call a function on it called c_str. So this function in the standard string returns a C-style version of the string. And then we can replace these, width, height, and we're good. Now the main function is starting to get long, but I think I will implement the rest of this stuff in the main, and then we can start refactoring and breaking this into smaller functions once we know everything is working. Let me recompile before we stop recording, just make sure everything is still working. There we go, window, 2 seconds, close down, no errors. So that's cool. Let's look at drawing in the next video.